Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. Hi, everyone. This is going to be a little bit different than a normal episode. This is going to be a solo cast and just a Q&A with me, Scott Meslinski, answering some questions I got on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram when I posted that I was doing a Q&A. I should note before this that standard disclaimer, this is not medical advice. I'm not a doctor. Talk to your doctor about all of this. Don't do anything I say, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just going to go through these questions, and I've tried to organize them a little bit, but I'm going to kind of jump around on various topics. So let's just dive right in. Carnivore on a budget. What are the best cuts of beef to save money? So number one here, I'm going to say something that's super obvious, but look for sales, shop the sales. I know personally near me, Star Market always has good sales on meat, whether it's steaks or ground beef. There's always something on sale. So shop the sales. Second is, you don't have to eat ribeye steaks every day, or New York strips. Some people don't like it. Some people love the taste of ground beef. I personally love the taste of ground beef. So I would say definitely, do ground beef. Ground beef is great. You can freeze it super easily. You can form it into patties. It doesn't taste gross when you reheat it in the microwave. I think it tastes good cold. Just a lot of good uses for ground beef. And it's super easy to cook. The next would be frozen patties. So I do a lot of shopping on Peapod, but you can also get these from Costco, Costco.com, and a lot of grocery stores will have them. Sometimes they'll be more expensive, like the Bubba burgers or whatever. You have to watch out for fillers, but sometimes you can get frozen patties for less than $3 a pound. And in my opinion, those are even tastier and better than ground beef because, they don't go bad. Most ground beef goes bad quickly, and they just cook perfectly. They get a nice sear on the outside and they stay soft in the middle. So highly recommend those. And then chuck roast is great. You can take a chuck roast, cut it into chuck steaks. And if you grill them the right way in a cast iron skillet, they taste very similar to ribeye. And chuck steak, also great, but that'll cost a little bit more than a chuck roast. So those are just some tips to save money. Another is if you do include eggs in your diet, some people don't, some people can't. But if you do, those are very economical. You can get a dozen free range eggs for like $4 a carton very easily or less. So I'd highly recommend that. And I would definitely pony up for some of the more expensive eggs. The change in nutrient density in eggs going from conventional to cage-free to free range is huge. Just something like a pasture-raised egg has 12 times the nutrition of a conventional egg. So I'd definitely shoot for free range or better. Okay, so moving on. Next question. Do you know of health problems or limits from animal food compared to ruminant meat, i.e. red meat? This aside from enzymatic issues like lactate. So I think this question is basically asking, are there problems people have with eating carnivore and including foods besides red meat? So he already mentioned in the question enzymatic issues. So a lot of people just have lactose intolerance. They can't tolerate dairy. But I'm going to talk about some others. So non-red meat animal foods, this would include, from my perspective, eggs would be the main one, dairy, poultry, including chicken, and fish and seafood. So, in dairy could be butter, cheese, poultry could be chicken, fish and seafood. You could have tuna, salmon, shellfish, and pork is traditionally considered a red meat, but I'll talk about that a little bit too. So I think in general, red meat should be your base, because for a few reasons. One is it's very high in vitamins. It also has creatine, carnitine, and essential amino acids, all in high quantities and well balanced. And it's a great source of healthy fats and protein. So I think starting there is always great. But moving down on some of these additional foods, butter and cheese. Some problems people can have with butter and cheese. I personally don't include them except for a tiny bit of cheese once in a blue moon. Butter and cheese can cause inflammation, insulin responses, especially if it isn't raw. If you have pasteurized cheese. And then many report sleep issues and also gut health issues with cheese. And then finally, cheese is generally hyperpalatable, so it's pretty easy to overeat. If you're like me, you could eat a whole block of Dubliner or Gouda cheese very easily. And then finally, soft cheese, like cream cheese, can have some carbs in it. And generally, some of these cheaper cheeses have a poor omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid profile. So that's cheese. And then poultry/pork, both of these I'm lumping together, even though pork might be considered red meat again, because they're very high in polyunsaturated omega-6 and linoleic acid, which is specifically what you're trying to avoid by not eating vegetable oils. They cause inflammation, they promote cancer, they can kill your brain cells, promote cardiovascular events. I generally think these are bad. They also lack a lot of the vitamins that beef has. They're low in fat, and eating too low fat for extended periods of time can disrupt your hormones. It can hurt your mood, etc. So those are some problems with poultry and pork. I'm not saying you can't eat these foods, by the way. I'm just, the question was specifically about health problems stemming from these foods. Eggs. I think eggs are great. They have more amino acids than beef, a more complete amino acid profile. They're high in healthy cholesterol, high in choline. They have certain vitamins like K2 and biotin. But some of the negative side effects of eggs is some have poor gut reactions to eggs, or inflammation that can come from eggs. And some also say it's just less satisfying than beef. I know Sean Baker talks about this a lot. And then one more last food item I'll mention is whey protein. I don't think it's a necessary or healthy part of a carnivore diet, but some would call it an animal food. And problems there are, it can cause a lot of inflammation. Some would say it spikes your insulin. I've looked at and heard conflicting research on that, so I'm not completely sure. There's also a lot of fillers in most whey, even if you think there aren't, and it can also cause poor digestion. So that's health problems with non-ruminant animal foods. So moving on this kind of eating topic, what are your tips for an office worker or for families for snacks? So number one, with regards to snacking, and I believe one of the listeners asked this in the question, is eating more meat at meals so you won't need to snack. Definitely try to do that. I advocate having a very large breakfast. It resets your circadian rhythm. People who eat only breakfast versus only dinner in controlled studies have better sleep, better fat loss, better hormones, everything. So I'm always a huge advocate of eating more of your food earlier in the day, and starting your day with a big breakfast. So it doesn't have to be right after you get up, but earlier in the day is good. I'm not a fan of extended fasting starting in the morning. And then snacks, specifically, if you do need to snack, here's some things I have at work. I usually just add them onto meals. I don't have them as a snack, but they can be good. One is Wild Planet sardines. Make sure you get the ones packed in water. Those are great because they're high in omega-3s. They have bones, so you're getting good calcium and other vitamins. And then there's also similarly, if you can't do the sardines, Wild Planet salmon packed in water, also delicious, a lot leaner though. And then I actually bring salt to work. I think that's kind of silly, but definitely important. I have the Redmond's salt and also Himalayan pink salt I bring in. And then you can do beef sticks. You have to be really careful with these. Similar to beef jerky, they can have a lot of fillers. Even the casing, the citric acid they use can upset stomachs. I know if I have certain ones, I get bad acid in my throat. One brand I like is Nix sticks. You can find those on Amazon. They're kind of expensive, but delicious. And then other snacks, boiled eggs. You can bring in hard-boiled eggs. I just do them in the Instant Pot, set it for 1 minute on high, quick release, and they come out perfect. They're like medium boiled. Make sure you don't peel them. If you don't peel them, they last a full week in the fridge. If you do peel them, they just last a day or so. And then lastly, pork rinds and biltong. Both of these are good. Be very careful to check the ingredients. Make sure you're getting good brands like Kalahari biltong and Epic pork rinds. Again, these can get expensive, but if you have to have snacks with you, you got to pay up. And then another option, if you're at work and don't have food, is just burgers, patties from a fast food place like Wendy's or McDonald's. Always a good deal. So that's snacks. Next question. So here I'm just going to give you a heads up. I'm going to dive a little bit deep on fat loss in this question, and exercise. But I'll try to give kind of a holistic, pithy answer. And then if folks want to learn more, I'll direct to some resources. But, someone asked, how much meat per kilogram is reasonable for a woman who wants to lose weight, but she works out often? She works out 5 times a week. She asked, would eating less greasy meat be better? So I'll preface this by saying I've tried everything for fat loss. I haven't tried the baby food diet, but I've tried a lot of things. I did lean gains. I've done calorie counting. I've done keto gains, protein sparing modified fast, etc. And the number one thing I've learned is that your body is smarter than you. What I mean by that is you can't out-discipline your body in the long run. So anything you do to cut weight has to be mostly effortless. Motivation is fleeting, and you might feel like, I'm ready to do this. I'm tough. I can conquer the world. I can count calories, cut calories, for the next however many weeks. But hunger will always catch up to you. I've learned this lesson probably 10 times, and I keep forgetting it, but it's been a long time since I last forgot it. So hopefully I can keep that solidified, and maybe saying it to you will help. And then moving on from that, the next thing I'll say is that exercise sucks for weight loss. Because one, you burn less calories than you think, or the treadmill says you do. Our bodies are really efficient and not wasting away calories and just giving away energy that might be hard to find in our ancestral environment. And then two, it's really easy to eat back those calories. So, you go to the gym, you go there for an hour, you go on the treadmill, it says you burned 500 calories, you really burned 250 and 300 calories, you're starving, you have, an extra couple strips of bacon, and all of a sudden you've overeaten your calorie deficit. So your body is smart and it adjusts. So I wouldn't advocate exercise for weight loss. Exercise is great for lean mass retention, building lean mass, cognitive benefits, a whole other host of health benefits. And these are important. The muscle is particularly important because your metabolism is higher with more muscle, and muscle helps with hundreds of other health benefits like insulin sensitivity, cognitive function, resistance to disease and infection, etc. So working out is great. But if you're working out 5 times a week, maybe scale that back to regulate your appetite. Try 2 to 3 times a week and focus on, 30 minutes to an hour and make it really focused on resistance training, trying to build up muscle. And if you're doing other types of exercise that you enjoy, like sports, that's great, but that's recreation. Don't fool yourself into thinking that that's helping you lose weight or improving your health in some other way. And then on the food side of it, so what would I do if I was trying to lose weight? Number one, I'd first try removing foods that might be causing you to put on or hold weight. So cheese, butter, pork rinds, bacon, all these optional foods, any type of dairy, heavy cream, anything that just might be suboptimal. You really want to get down to fatty beef. And if you're already doing that, in general, I'm a big fan of eating fatty meat to satiety. 2 to 3 times a day. I'm not a fan of trying to restrict, especially when you're getting it adapted. I'm not a fan of intentionally fasting. If you're eating 5 times a day, maybe you want to cut that back to 3 and maybe 2. But especially for the first 6 to 9 months of carnivore, I don't think you should calorie restrict, intentionally fast. You should eat when you're hungry till you're full, and just try to get adapted. And I would say generally for a woman, that means eating at least 1.5 pounds a day, possibly much more. Kelly Hogan, for example, is zero carb veteran. And you can check out podcasts with her on human performance outliers and etc. She's in the low hundreds of pounds, and she eats 2 pounds a day right now for maintenance, and sometimes a lot more. And I know for a long time she was eating 4 pounds a day and losing weight. So you probably need more meat than you think you do, and get fully adapted to eating just meat and heal, and then worry about trying to make adjustments. Many people are coming from a place of restriction, and their bodies need to fill back up on vitamins and nutrients. Once they do that, once you feel really good and healthy and are full of energy, the weight might just start coming off on its own. And it might be really gradual, but you're not going to gain that weight back if you stick on carnivore. It's not like, oh, I have to count calories for 2 weeks and then I'm going to lose 5 pounds. And then, what happens? You stop counting calories and you gain it all back right away. When you lose weight on carnivore with a style of eating that you're going to sustain for life, it stays off. And so after those, if all of that has been done and it doesn't work, then I would suggest keeping the same quantity, but mixing in some leaner cuts. So not every day and not all day, but maybe you have 3 meals a day, and before you're eating 3 fatty ribeyes, then you have 1 fatty ribeye and 2, round roasts, or 2 packs of 90-10 ground beef. And you leave the extra fat in the pan. So I would only do this, again, I want to emphasize, after you've been doing carnivore for a long time and it's still not working. But you can kind of do higher protein, lower fat, to satiety. And then you can do fat refeeds every couple days or so. You go back to your higher fat meats, and see how that feels. And, I said I would redirect people to, more information on this if they want. Check out kevinstock.io, and his other blog, meat.health. He has some excellent resources. He's a super jacked bodybuilder, doctor, knows a ton about diets, and he's written a lot about fat loss on carnivore and also muscle building. Next question: when do I need to track calories with carnivore? See above. This is what I just answered, but I would say don't just. The only time someone might want to track calories is if they feel like they're under eating. So just if you feel like you're under eating, check out how much you're eating, and I would make sure you're eating, at least 2,000 calories for a woman, maybe 2,500 or more for a man. Next category: drinking on carnivore. So let's talk about what is good to drink. Coffee and tea. I think those are fine personally. A lot of people are against coffee and tea in the carnivore community. I have talked to Amber O'Hearn about this. You can check out my podcast with her, but long story short, I think they're fine, and many people can get away with it. Few things: I would just take it black. I would not add anything to it. Nothing. No cream, no heavy cream, no butter, no MCT. All of these can defeat the purpose of carnivore, which is getting your nutrition, your fat, your protein from meat, not from liquids or plant foods or added foods. I would also try to limit coffee to, about 16 ounces a day or less. If you're drinking 6 to 10 cups a day, you run the risk of things like adrenal fatigue and, messing with your appetite regulation, spiking your cortisol production. So all that stuff isn't great. And I also would suggest not drinking coffee or caffeine after noon, for sleep reasons. Someone asked about decaf coffee. I would not recommend it. Decaf, from what I've read, has a lot of nasty stuff in it. Sorry, that's super vague and not scientific, but I've read that essentially the filtration process for decaf coffee leaves a lot of bad toxins in it. So a lot of people have worse reactions to it than regular coffee. And in general, I think it's just like a bad habit that you should try to kick. You're not really getting anything from it. What else can you drink? Carbonated water, great. Water, great. I would try to limit flavored carbonated water, like Zevia or LaCroix. LaCroix recently came out for having insecticide in it, so maybe you want to avoid that. But the reason to avoid these in general is sort of the palate. They're sweet, and when you're consuming more sweet things, with a carnivore diet, you're really trying to get away from the sweetness and the addiction to sweetness. So cutting out sweet foods, sweet drinks is important for that. Alcohol, everyone's favorite topic. So I highly discourage drinking on a carnivore diet. I don't drink. It's a toxin. If you feel like you have to drink, I would ask yourself why you feel that way. Take a good hard look at your deeper at your social interactions, who you spend time with, why you're insecure and feel like you need to drink. I know that's not a popular opinion, but think about it. And if you do drink, if you absolutely feel like you need it or a celebration warrants it, I suggest clear spirits first and no sweeteners or beer/wine. So that's drinking. All right, so that's the eating segment. I'm now going to move on to a little bit about sports, and then talking a little bit about supplements and requirements, and then we're going to get into some evolution type stuff. So how long does it take to adapt for sports such as weightlifting and sprinting? How would you optimize carnivore for glycolytic sports? So number one, this can be very individualistic. So you have to obviously test for yourself, like everything else with nutrition and exercise. So adaptation times are highly variable, and it also depends a lot on what you're coming from. Are you coming from a standard American diet where you're relying a lot on carbs, or even a higher carb than standard American diet if you're certain athletes, or are you coming from a keto or low carb place? So I'll go through a few sports. I know they asked specifically about lifting weights and sprinting, but I'll just go through it all. So let's start with endurance sports. So coming from keto, endurance sports seem to take about a month to get adapted from keto to carnivore. And then there's, just like coming from standard American diet to keto, there's better fat adaptation over time. So, 6 months in versus a year in versus longer, your fat adaptation, your ability to use fat for fuel will just keep improving. From a standard American diet, I would guess it would take like double, 2 months. For endurance sports, maybe longer, who knows. Lifting/sprinting, I would say coming from a keto or low carb diet, getting back to your optimal lifting percentages, or your sprint performance, it's probably 2 to 3 months, going from keto or low carb to carnivore. And then I would double that for a standard American diet. And then finally, for sports like soccer and rugby, these are tough because that's like sort of a mix of aerobic and anaerobic and a lot of sprints. And the problem is you are often slowly depleting through your glycogen stores doing those sports. So I think those could take even longer. Potentially. And I've heard people say anecdotally that keto is probably least suited to these types of sports. So I have no idea how long it would take, maybe 4 to 6 months, coming from keto or low carb, maybe something similar for a standard American diet, or maybe more like, 8 to 9 months. But again, individualistic. Some people may be much faster than these. I've seen people report feeling stronger or higher energy in as little as a week or two switching to a carnivore diet. So it totally depends. And then ways to get adapted faster or to optimize for glycolytic sports, number one, number two, and number three are all salt. Eat way more than you think you need. You might want to supplement with magnesium as well. And I would just jump right into carnivore. Also, I would not taper into it. Go straight for it. Don't taper down your carbs. I think that's important. And then someone asked about carbs around the workout. You could do that. I would definitely advocate trying, especially if you're in your off season, try doing it without the carbs first. If you never have to rely on them, I think that's just easier and better for your digestion, for your nutrition. And you can look at folks like Owen Franks from the New Zealand All Blacks. He was on Sean Baker's Human Performance Outliers podcast. Dr. Anthony Chaffee was also on there. And they're both rugby players. So that would be a great example. And they're athletes, they're marathon runners, endurance athletes, all bodybuilders, all doing carnivore and all performing well on it. And then someone asked thoughts on sodium, magnesium, potassium supplementation. So it kind of ties off the previous question. I think, jury's still out on this. Who knows how much of sodium, magnesium, and potassium you need. On one hand, a lot of long-term carnivores say that they gave up salt and they feel way better. It helps with some people. I've read articles saying that, if you and seen research and talks from Frank Tufano saying if you just have sodium, it's bad because your body needs a balance of sodium, magnesium, potassium, and calcium. And so if you just have a ton of sodium, you'll be deficient in magnesium and potassium. I've also read recently that your body is really effective at pulling, basically supplementing magnesium and potassium and regulating your salt intake. So if you just eat a ton of salt, you'll excrete it or sweat it out. And, magnesium and potassium, are, as long as you have decent values of those, you'll be fine. What's really dangerous is having low salt. For folks who are curious about this, I'd recommend looking at Dr. James Nicolantonio. He had a podcast also on Humans Performance Outliers. He talks about this and the balance of those. Long story short, I just think add salt to your meat. If you enjoy it, salt to taste. If you're going to do a hard workout, salt before the workout often helps. I take some magnesium some nights. I don't supplement potassium at all. And for now I feel fine, but I'm open to changing my mind on that. Someone asked a ridiculous question. What are your thoughts on consuming small amounts of diatomaceous earth? Sorry. Don't mean to laugh at you. I just have no idea what this is. So I'm going to skip that one. Okay, so now a few nutrient things. Someone asked about iodine. Okay, so what about iodine? How did man get it in prehistoric times, and how do we get it now? So I found this. I did a little research on this. Iodine basically helps with thyroid function and mental health. Has a lot of important uses. It's a mineral. Foods that are high in iodine. So first of all, where did prehistoric people get them? Probably three places. One is fish. Two is shellfish. These are both very high in iodine. And then three is vegetables. So a caveat here is vegetables used to have lots of iodine, but we selectively bred vegetables and changed them. And the vegetables on Earth today are dramatically different than the vegetables even 100 years ago. They're all new and completely different. And they don't really contain iodine anymore. Other ways you can get iodine today are iodized salt, which is just, normal table salt, not pink Himalayan salt, which actually lacks iodine, and beef and eggs. So there are huge problems with the RDAs. They're not based on a lot of evidence, and they don't necessarily apply to people eating a carnivore diet. But the RDA for iodine, just FYI, is 150 micrograms. For pregnant women, it's higher because iodine is important for fertility and breastfeeding. So 150 micrograms. Eggs have 10 micrograms per egg, so 15 eggs would fit it. A small tin of canned salmon has 60 micrograms. 6 oysters has 144, so that pretty much hits it right there. And then Some sources says meat has none, and then other sources say meat has 25 to 130 micrograms per pound. So if you're eating 2 pounds or more of meat per day, you're theoretically hitting the RDA. But again, I don't necessarily trust the RDAs for a variety of reasons. So that's iodine. Moving on, here we have vitamin C requirements. So a lot of folks have probably heard about this, so I'll just keep this one brief. Vitamin C requirements are lower on an all-meat diet because vitamin C competes with glucose for metabolic pathways. So if you don't have glucose, 1 in the form of sugar, 2 in the form of starch and carbs, and 3 in the form of vegetables, your vitamin C requirements just gradually become lower and lower, which is why a lot of people require not getting sick on low-carb diets or keto diets as much. Part of that reason is because their body can produce enough vitamin C or hold onto enough vitamin C, whereas when they were eating all the glucose and all the starch, they needed more vitamin C to make up for the fact that glucose was using that metabolic pathway. Number 2, beef and liver both have great vitamin C. Beef, pound of beef apparently has the recommended daily allowance of vitamin C, but it was assumed to be 0 in the nutritional databases, which is another reason I generally don't trust those and don't like to think about nutrient density in that way. And then liver, beef liver, other forms of liver have tons of vitamin C. Silly question here. But one that probably I get a ton and everyone in the carnivore community gets, and it is about poop. So someone asks, is it normal to have constipation during the adaptation period? Should I expect it? Yes, that can be common. But some people have the opposite. Some people get, too much trips to the bathroom. So, a few things here. One, whenever you change your diet dramatically, you are going to have an upset stomach. So it does not mean, and you're going to have some indigestion in one form or another. That does not mean that those foods are not optimal for you. Even if you're a carnivore and you try some Brussels sprouts or some plants and all of a sudden your stomach hurts or you get diarrhea, it doesn't mean those foods are not optimal for you. It just means it's a transition. And your gut is not used to digesting those foods. So, sometimes you just have to wait it out, unfortunately, and, commit to trying this new diet. But if you are constipated, I would recommend you drink plenty of water and use salt on your food. Those can both help, get enough sleep. If you drink coffee, maybe that'll help. These things can all help with keeping you regular. And then make sure you're getting plenty of fat on your meat. Fat can help you push things along. And if you are having the opposite problem, if you're going to the bathroom too often or not having solid stools, I would think about cutting back on your fat intake a little bit. So some folks don't do well with rendered fat, which is the fat that comes off ground beef or meat. And some people just have a very low tolerance for fat. And again, that's an adaptation thing. So your body needs to get used to digesting more fat, greater quantities of fat. So something that can help with this. This is again, not if you're constipated, but if you're having diarrhea or the runs, betaine HCl tablets. You take a few of them with each meal. They're cheap. Hydrochloric acid, it helps your body break down the fat, and that's exactly what your body will eventually naturally produce on its own. But by taking the supplement, you're sort of giving it training wheels and helping it along, and it doesn't inhibit your own body's ability to adapt or make those things. Lots of people have recommended them, so I think that's a great while you're getting adapted. Okay, let's move on to evolution. So why are our teeth very flat compared to any other carnivore, and why can we grind with our jaws like herbivores? I'm also going to throw in there, why are gorillas, so this is kind of a vegan myth, so I'm going to throw in another, which is why are gorillas, so big and strong and they just eat plants all day and they're herbivores, blah, blah, blah. Why do we need meat? They're our quote unquote ancestors. One, we evolved away from apes many years ago. Closest ancestor was several million years ago with apes. Two, we invented tools millions of years ago. So we did not have to cut through things with our teeth. And as we developed larger brains, and dedicated more and more of our energy to our brain and to our jaws, and away from our jaws, we grew smaller jaws, less ape-like, and also we gradually got rid of parts of our stomach. So, herbivores have a much more extensive digestive system, more stomachs in some cases, a rumen in the case of a ruminants, more of a cecum, and other other digestive apparati that we do not. So if you look at the digestive system of a wolf or a cat, we're much closer to that, both in terms of the pH of our stomachs and what we have left. It's really pretty basic. So I'd say we are opportunistic omnivores. We eat plants when we don't have a choice. And when we, if we were running around hunting woolly mammoths and we magically found a store of berries, we would gorge on those berries to try to fatten up when calories were scarce, but they're definitely not optimal. I'd say we're optimally suited to be carnivores. That's my opinion. Next one is blue zones. Someone was saying that blue zones are used as an argument against carnivore and why you shouldn't eat carnivore. So for people who don't know what blue zones are specific populations that have high concentrations of centenarians, which means people living past 100 years old. That's a centenarian. So these blue zones, these areas have a lot of people living older than 100. And a few of them are Okinawa in Japan, Loma Linda in California, Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and Icaria, Greece. So similar to epidemiological research, there are a lot of confounding factors here. So we aren't talking about populations that looked exactly like other parts of the world, but just ate a different diet than them. We're talking about populations that in general had a few things in common. One, a lot of them worked all day long, physical labor. So, they weren't inactive, they weren't sedentary, they weren't hunched over staring at computer screens at a desk. Two, they had really strong community aspects. And religion, almost all of these communities had a religious factor and were big on family and community and friends and social gatherings. So that we know helps with longevity. Another one is they all were in hilly places. So, climbing up hills, engaging those muscles, I'm sure that contributed to their health. They also all got lots of sunlight. These are all very sunny places. They were getting vitamin D regularly. They all slept well. A lot of these places had regular naps. Most of these places didn't have smoking. Loma Linda University is, for folks who don't know, the Seventh-day Adventist town. So I believe they don't drink. They're similar to Quakers in a lot of ways. So there's just a lot of confounding factors. It's not like these are populations that are studied only for their diet. They have a lot of other health promoting lifestyle factors that are helping them. So you really can't say one way or another whether it was the meat or not that helped them. And then additionally, Okinawa is one that's commonly cited as being really high carb, but actually, if you look at more of the data, they were eating massive amounts of pork up until recently. And when they stopped eating pork, when they moved to more rice and more vegetable oils, that's when they've all started getting fat and they lost their concentration of centenarians. So in general, I mean, this is just epidemiological correlational research that has a lot of confounding factors. Okay, last question. The listener says, I think I have Candida overgrowth. When I went keto to carnivore, I felt great the first month, but then eczema, dandruff came back. I guess Candida adapted to fat and protein. How can I get rid of Candida? Number one, I don't know much about Candida at all. I haven't looked into it. It seems important. I feel very bad for people who suffer from it. from what I know, it's something that's left over in your digestion or your stomach or something. I would look up Frank Tufano. He's talked a lot about this on YouTube. And then I'd also look up someone called Logical Links on Twitter and Instagram. I believe he had Candida that I think he's relieved. I understand Candida can take a very long time to heal, so I would suggest you stick with it. And I would also look at what pro-inflammatory foods you might be eating, such as cheese, coffee, eggs, spices that you may have to cut out that may be suboptimal. And, just like any other autoimmune condition, these foods might have an inflammatory response for you. So that's all for today, folks. Thanks for listening. If you made it through that, really appreciate it. Let me know what you thought. If you like this, I'll do more Q&As in the future. I'm really enjoying all the great feedback I've been getting on the podcast. It makes it all worth it. I love getting emails from you guys, just messages on my Instagram or Twitter. It really means the world to me. I'm having a blast interviewing guests, and I hope you're getting some value out of these episodes as well. So go have a great steak. A steak a day keeps the doctor away. And thanks again for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered? Or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CarnivoreCast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.